When the world goes quiet and the streets empty out, the night belongs to those brave enough to stay awake and keep watch. Security guards working the graveyard shift see the things most of us never do. In the dead of night, when shadows stretch and silence becomes deafening, the unexpected has a way of creeping in. In this video, we'll dive into 4 chilling real-life stories from night security guards who encounter the unexplainable. These aren't just tales of routine patrols. These are moments that left them questioning reality and fearing the dark corners of the buildings they were tasked to protect. Turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and prepare to hear what happens when the night takes a sinister turn. Let's get started. My name is Tony, and for a few years, I worked as a nighttime security guard at a retail store. It was one of those big box stores, the kind with endless aisles and a cavernous layout. My job was straightforward: patrol the store, check the cameras, and make sure everything was locked up until the morning crew arrived. But one night, during a shift I'll never forget, I realized there are some things you can't prepare for, no matter how much training you have. It was a slow Wednesday night in December, just a few weeks before Christmas. The store had closed at 10 p.m., and I began my usual routine. The lights in most sections were dimmed, and the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. I always found the atmosphere eerie, especially in the toy section, where rows of dolls and stuffed animals seemed to watch you as you walked by. Around midnight, I decided to do a quick patrol. I grabbed my flashlight and began making my way through the aisles. Everything was quiet, just as it should be. But as I turned a corner into the electronics section, I noticed something odd. One of the TVs on display was on, playing static. This wasn't normal. All electronics were supposed to be powered down when the store closed. I walked up to the TV, switched it off, and made a note to report it in the morning. But as I turned to leave, I heard a faint noise, like a whisper. It wasn't coming from the TV. It was coming from deeper in the store. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Is someone there? I called out, my voice echoing through the empty space. No answer. I told myself it was probably just my imagination or the building settling, but I couldn't shake the unease. I continued my patrol, this time more alert. As I approached the clothing section, I noticed something even stranger. A single mannequin was out of place, standing in the middle of the aisle. I knew it hadn't been there earlier. I would have noticed. Feeling uneasy, I approached the mannequin. It was one of those plain ones with no facial features, just a smooth, blank surface. As I got closer, I felt a cold draft pass by me, even though there were no windows or vents nearby. I told myself it was just a prank, maybe one of the employees messing with me. But when I checked the cameras back in the security room, what I saw made my blood run cold. The mannequin had moved. On the footage, it was clear as day. One moment, it was standing on its platform near the entrance, and the next, it was walking, yes, walking, into the clothing section. But the way it moved wasn't natural, it was jerky, like something out of an old stop-motion film. I rewound the footage several times, thinking there had to be some kind of glitch, but the movements were consistent. I even checked the cameras in other parts of the store, and sure enough, there were brief moments where the mannequin appeared, standing still, as if watching me. Panic set in. I debated calling the police, but what would I say? A mannequin is walking around the store? They'd think I was crazy. I decided to stay in the security room for the rest of the night, keeping my eyes glued to the monitors. But as the hours passed, the cameras started glitching, sections of the store would flicker to static, and when the feed came back, the mannequin would be gone. At one point, the camera for the toy section went out entirely. When it came back on, I saw something that still haunts me, the mannequin standing in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by toys that had been knocked over. Its head was tilted, as if it were looking directly at the camera. When my shift finally ended, I left the store without looking back. I quit the next day, telling my manager I couldn't work nights anymore. To this day, I don't know what I saw or how to explain it. But one thing's for sure, I'll never step foot in that store again. Are you ready for the second story? My name is Victor, and I used to work the night shift as a security guard at a small convenience store on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the busiest job, but the pay was decent, and the quiet nights gave me plenty of time to think. But one night, something happened that I'll never forget, something that made me quit without even finishing my 2 weeks' notice. It was a cold January night, the kind where your breath hangs in the air like smoke. The store was empty, as usual, and I was sitting behind the counter, sipping on a cup of coffee to stay awake. The only sound was the soft buzz of the overhead lights and the occasional hum of the fridge units in the back. Around 2 a.m., I decided to stretch my legs and do a quick walk around the store. The aisles were neat and quiet, and everything seemed normal. But as I walked toward the storage room in the back, I noticed something strange. The door, which I always kept locked, was slightly ajar. I frowned, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. No one else had access to that door but me and the store manager, and he wasn't scheduled to come in until the morning. I approached cautiously, flashlight in hand, and pushed the door open. The storage room was dark, save for the faint glow from a single bulb dangling from the ceiling. Everything seemed in place, boxes stacked neatly, shelves organized, but then I noticed footprints on the dusty floor. They weren't mine. The footprints were large and barefoot, leading from the doorway to the far corner of the room. I shone my flashlight toward the corner, but there was nothing there, just a stack of empty crates. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. I backed out of the room and locked the door again, trying to convince myself it was just some prank. Maybe someone had slipped in earlier and hid back there. I checked the front doors. They were locked, as they should be. I returned to my seat behind the counter and started watching the security monitors more closely. The cameras covered the main store area and the parking lot, but the storage room didn't have one installed. As I scanned the footage, something caught my eye, a figure standing at the edge of the parking lot, just outside the reach of the streetlights. It was hard to make out any details, but the figure was tall and seemed to be watching the store. I felt a chill run down my spine. I kept my eyes glued to the monitor, hoping the person would just walk away. But instead, they began to move slowly, deliberately, toward the store. I reached for the phone to call the police, but just as I picked it up, the cameras went static. "Come on," I muttered, smacking the monitor. When the feed came back, the figure was gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but the relief didn't last long. A loud thud came from the back of the store, followed by what sounded like boxes toppling over. Grabbing my flashlight, I made my way toward the noise, heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the storage room door, I saw it was open again, even though I was sure I had locked it. The room was a mess, boxes scattered across the floor, shelves knocked over. But what froze me in place was the sight of those same barefoot footprints, now leading out of the room and into the main store. I slowly backed away, every instinct screaming at me to run, when I heard a soft, raspy breathing coming from one of the aisles. I turned my flashlight toward the sound and saw him. A man, tall and gaunt, with pale skin and sunken eyes, was standing between the shelves. He wasn't wearing any shoes, and his feet were covered in dirt. His head tilted slightly as he stared at me, unblinking. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. He didn't respond. Instead, he took a slow step toward me. That was enough. I dropped the flashlight and bolted for the front door. I don't remember how I managed to unlock it so quickly, but I ran out into the cold night and didn't stop until I was halfway down the street. When I finally looked back, the store was dark and silent, as if nothing had happened. I quit the next day. To this day, I have no idea who or what that man was, and I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is I'll never work another night shift again. Let's go to the third story. When I first took the job as a night security guard at a small grocery store, I thought it would be easy money. The idea of sitting in a quiet store all night, occasionally walking around to check on things, sounded like the perfect gig for someone like me who didn't mind solitude. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during one of my shifts, a night that still haunts me to this day. My name is Sam, and this happened about 2 years ago. It was a quiet Tuesday night in February, and the weather outside was brutal, freezing rain and howling winds that rattled the glass doors at the entrance. Nights like this were usually uneventful. Nobody in their right mind would be out in such conditions, and the store had been closed for hours. I was sitting in the security office, keeping an eye on the cameras. Everything looked normal. The aisles were empty, the parking lot was deserted, and the only sounds were the occasional hum of the refrigeration units and the wind outside. Around midnight, I decided to do a quick walkthrough of the store to stretch my legs. The aisles were dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the emergency lights. As I walked through the produce section, I thought I heard something, a faint shuffling sound, like footsteps. I stopped and listened, my heart starting to race. "Hello?" I called out, but the store was silent. I shook it off, telling myself it was probably just the wind or the building settling. But as I continued my patrol, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. When I got back to the security office, I decided to review the footage from the last hour, just to put my mind at ease. As I skimmed through the recordings, I froze. On one of the cameras covering the cereal aisle, I saw something, or someone. It was a figure, barely visible in the dim light. They were standing at the far end of the aisle, motionless. I rewound the footage, thinking it must have been a glitch, but there it was again, the same figure, standing perfectly still. I switched to the live feed, but the aisle was empty now. Still, my gut told me to check it out. Grabbing my flashlight, I made my way back to the cereal aisle. When I got there, it was empty, just as the cameras had shown. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. One of the cereal boxes was lying on the floor. I picked it up and put it back on the shelf, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But then I saw it. A handprint, smeared on the glass door of the freezer section. The print was large and looked fresh, as if someone had pressed their hand against the glass just moments ago. But the freezer aisle was locked at night, and I was the only one with the key. I backed away, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The air around me felt colder than it should have, and I swear I could hear faint whispers, like someone was speaking just out of earshot. I hurried back to the security office, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I rewound the footage again, desperate to find some explanation. But what I saw made my stomach drop. On the live feed from the freezer aisle, the handprint was still there, but now there was something else. A shadowy figure stood at the far end, its outline barely distinguishable in the dim light. It wasn't moving, just standing there, as if watching me. I called the police, not caring how ridiculous I might sound. When they arrived, they searched the entire store but found nothing. The handprint was gone, and the cameras showed no evidence of the figure I'd seen. I never went back to that job. To this day, I can't explain what I saw or how it happened, but I'll never forget the overwhelming sense of dread I felt that night. Some things, I think, are better left unexplained. The last story now. Working the night shift as a security guard wasn't my first choice, but it paid the bills and gave me time to focus on my studies during the day. My name is Gabriel, and I thought the worst part of the job would be fighting off boredom during the long, quiet hours. I was wrong. It was a Friday night in December, just a few days before Christmas. The store had closed early for the holidays, and by 10 p.m., the parking lot was completely empty. Outside, a light snow was falling, coating the ground in a thin white blanket. Inside, the store was dimly lit, with only the emergency lights casting a soft glow over the aisles. I was sitting in the small security office, flipping through a book to pass the time. The monitor showed nothing unusual: empty aisles, an empty parking lot, and the locked main entrance. It was shaping up to be another uneventful night until I heard a faint sound, like something tapping against the glass doors at the front of the store. I stood up, my heart starting to race, and checked the monitor for the entrance. At first, I didn't see anything. But then, in the corner of the frame, I noticed a figure standing just outside the door. They were barely visible through the falling snow, but they didn't look like a customer or anyone I'd recognize. The figure was tall, wearing what appeared to be a dark hood or cloak that obscured their face. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the front of the store, my footsteps echoing in the empty aisles. When I reached the entrance, the figure was gone. The snow outside was untouched, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. Trying to shake off the unease, I returned to the office and rewound the footage. Sure enough, the figure was there on the recording, standing motionless for a few seconds before disappearing. But what sent a chill down my spine was what I saw next. The figure didn't walk away, it just vanished. One frame they were there, and the next, they were gone. I sat back in my chair, staring at the monitor in disbelief. But before I could process what I had seen, the lights in the store flickered. A loud crash came from the back of the store, like something heavy had fallen. Grabbing my flashlight again, I cautiously made my way toward the noise. When I reached the back storage area, the scene was eerie. Boxes were toppled over, and several items had spilled onto the floor. But what caught my attention was a trail of wet footprints leading from the loading dock to one of the aisles. The footprints were bare, and the water from the snow they'd tracked and glistened under the faint light. But the dock door was locked, and there was no way anyone could have gotten inside. I followed the trail to the aisle it led to, one with cleaning supplies and paper towels. At first, it seemed empty, but as I turned the corner, I felt the air grow colder. I shone my flashlight down the aisle, and that's when I saw it. The figure was there, crouched at the far end. Its face was still obscured, but I could hear faint, raspy breathing. My flashlight flickered, and I took a step back, heart pounding. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move. Instead, it slowly turned its head toward me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw glowing eyes staring back. Then, Just like on the camera, it vanished. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I grabbed my things and left the store, not even bothering to lock up. The next morning, I called my boss and quit. I still don't know what I saw that night or how to explain it. All I know is that something, or someone, was there, and it wasn't human. The night holds secrets we may never fully understand, and those who work under its cover often find themselves face to face with the unknown. These stories remind us that even in places we think are secure, there's always the possibility of something lurking just beyond our sight. Thank you for joining us as we explored these unsettling encounters. If you've ever had a strange experience during the night shift or anywhere else, feel free to share it in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories that chill to the bone. Until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant.